We're fortunate today to have another great Iowa mayor with us to discuss the role of civility in municipal leadership in both divisive and difficult times. And certainly, Secretary Vilsack experienced that coming into his public service after the mayor had been shot in Mount Pleasant. Mayor Bob Andeweg from Urbandale, Iowa, has over 2 decades of municipal government service, and we're pleased that he could join us today. Thanks for joining us, Mayor Andeweg. And
Thank you, Scott.
Maybe you could just start out and share with us a little bit about your background in municipal governance and the community of Urbandale.
Sure. Well, thanks, Scott, and thank you for the opportunity to be here today. Urbandale is a city of 46,000. It's been my honor to live there since 1988. Scott's a fellow resident of Urbandale and served our community very well in the legislature. I got involved in city government initially through the Planning and Zoning Commission. My daytime job is being an attorney and did a lot of real estate work, and I had an interest in that. So I asked the mayor at the time. I kept bugging him, and finally he had appointed me to the Planning and Zoning Commission. That led to a run to the city council. I actually lost my first election, but there was a gentleman that had won that, due to circumstances, had to move out of our community not long after that because of the job change. And I was appointed to fill that vacancy, and I was then served on the city council for 5 years, and then was elected mayor in 2005. I've been mayor since 2005. So that's a nutshell of my background in Urbandale government.
So, Mayor Andeweg, I know in your leadership, you've been very proactive in building a culture of civility in municipal governments. Maybe you could share with us some of the things that you focus on in your leadership, both the things that people might see publicly, but those things you're doing behind the scenes with council and leaders and other community leaders to help create a culture of civility in Urbandale.
Absolutely. Character counts and the 6 pillars of character have been ingrained in our community for many years. We actually have a visual reminder of that in one of our parks. We have the 6 pillars of character that are in our parks. In our conference room at City Hall, we have the 6 pillars that are listed on there. We read a character count statement before every city meeting, board, commission, or city council meeting, that we remind people that we abide by the 6 pillars of character, and that in conducting the meeting, we expect that all participants will act in a respectful manner, consistent with the principles of character counts. And we also have implemented, it hasn't been continuous, but we are going to re-implement that again as a character counts pledge for local government candidates to take a pledge that they will act in consistent with the principles of character counts in running for a local office.
Good. Mayor Andeweg, for those that may not know, those 6 pillars are trustworthiness, respect, responsibility, fairness, caring, and good citizenship. And their I in action orientation. I know you encourage in our leadership in our community that people think about that. What can I, Scott Raecker, do to act in a capacity worthy of trust? So my point of that, trying to pull that from you, is that in your leadership, it's not just, when there is a divisive situation or a difficult situation, then we'll turn and be civil. You've created a culture as a foundation, along with other community leaders, in the non-challenging times to really help address things in the challenging times. Like municipal leaders across the country, many of them obviously on this call webinar, you have had opportunities to lead through divisive issues in Urbandale. One example I'm familiar with is a division that's taken place in Urbandale between 2 soccer clubs that has escalated over time in response and action that's necessary from the city council. So share with us how you have led through those divisive issues and both what you've done publicly and what you've tried to do internally to help guide people to address these divisive issues with civility.
Sure. Thank you. So the issue that you mentioned on soccer was the fact that I'm sure, like many communities, we have limited resources for our recreational facilities for our kids. We do have soccer fields, and the model that Urbandale has used over the years is to enter into leases with the nonprofit organizations who would actually run the programs, and that model's worked pretty well. And historically, we had one soccer club in Urbandale that was the lessee and was managing the facilities. Uh, about 10 years ago, we had a second club that was started in Urbandale, and wanted to obtain space and time on our soccer fields. Well, again, due to the fact that we only have a limited number of fields and there's only so many hours in a day, it got to the point where both organizations were diametrically opposed to access to those fields, and it became a very strong challenge. And we had a number of meetings where there were some strong emotions on both sides of the issue as far as getting access to those fields, and it was a case where that the the organizations were just, again, diametrically opposed, and we could not find an easy middle ground to work with them. And so what we ended up doing, though, is even though we couldn't come to an agreement between the parties, what we could at least do is through the process, have respect for each other and listen respectfully and understand each side's positions and try to work as best we can to accommodate both organizations as best we can. And so that's where it was. It was a very difficult time. It came up more than once because we had terms of these leases of a limited term, so it would go on for a few years and then come back again. And it was very challenging. We had strong opinions on the council. We had strong opinions in our community. But I think at the end of the day, we worked, and because we had that culture of civility and respectfulness, we at least were able to work through very difficult issues, even though we're not able to accommodate everybody fully.
I appreciate you commenting on that, because it may be soccer in any other community. It could, and even in Urbandale, it could be affordable housing. It could be water issues. I mean, there's any number of things that can be divisive in a community. It seems to me, though, what I hear you saying is that there were some critical elements that you championed within the community, which was active listening to understand all sides and what they wanted, trying to bring into the prospect of making the best decision for before, as it comes to the council, for them to really seek the best for the greatest good for the citizens of Urbandale in the long run. And there is that, even when there's that divisiveness where there seems to be some non-negotiables on each side that are conflicting with each other, of trying to identify what is the win-win. How do we find, I want, you want, we could. And I think those are some of the lessons that I take away in listening from that. How have you found in your leadership, just as a follow-up to this, that active communication, meaning also the active listening to others, and because it's not just what happens in the council chamber, what are you doing as you're throughout the community trying to engage? Because I'm sure you're not just hearing about that particular issue at the council chamber, you're probably hearing about it at the grocery store as well.
Absolutely. My days are filled with coffees and one-on-one meetings. It's very easy to have a conversation or have the meeting and have the group dialogue, but I find it's also very helpful to really understand and get to know people on a one-on-one basis, and to listen respectfully and mindfully and actively, so I can understand positions better. So that's my role. My calendar gets filled with coffees and breakfast in the morning, and also meetings after work, and sometimes at lunches during the day as well. So I find that it's best to actively listen and to listen respectfully and to understand a person's position, so we can find that win-win.
One of the things you just mentioned and reiterated also from what we heard from Secretary Vilsack, and we're going to dive a little deeper into this afternoon on some strategies, is the foundational element of civility is the ability to build relationships with people, and especially people that are new and different, or may even be at odds with who you are. So I really appreciate you bringing that into the conversation, because it is a critical element of the civility. And as Robert was saying earlier, it's the foundational function of local governance, because all of you that serve are at the closest level to the people, and you're seeing them in and out throughout the day where you go. So I know that every person on this and that's going to listen to this that's leading locally will deal with divisive issues. Not necessarily will every mayor and municipal leader have to deal with really those challenging, difficult issues. We see in Iowa natural disasters, and those happen all across the country from small to large communities, and people tend to really respond and react positively to each other on that. But you've also had and have had to lead your community through very difficult times. When a young Urbandale police officer, Justin Martin, was shot and killed on a residential street back on November 2nd, 2016. And Urbandale is your quintessential suburban American community. These things don't happen in places like Urbandale, Iowa, and yet it did happen. Could you share with us a bit how you led the reaction and response to that tragic incident with a focus on civility and Urbandale being a community of care?
Thanks. That if somebody asked me during my tenure what's been my most difficult issue, and that really has been the most difficult issue I've had to deal with. I remember the day as if it were yesterday. I remember getting the call, being woken out of bed with a phone call at 12:30 in the morning, and going down to our city hall and sitting and not even having information for a couple of hours, and then slowly processing everything. It truly was a senseless act. What I tried to do during those hours and days is how to make sense of a senseless act, and I finally came to the realization that I couldn't. It was a senseless act. It was a horrific senseless act. Also, a Des Moines police officer had been killed by that same shooter on that day, and you can't make sense of that. So what I tried to do is, how do we then move forward? How do we best honor Justin and in his life and his sacrifice in that senseless act? And I came back to the character counts, and I came back to the fact that Justin was a young man that was just recently placed on our force. He was 21 years old, and he had given his life for our community and safety of our community. And he was demonstrating by his very acts, and his final act, he was demonstrating those pillars of character and in giving up his life to protect our community. And so that's what I really came back to, is to the best way that I can honor Justin and the sacrifice he made is to live my life going forward and to exemplify those 6 pillars of character moving forward.
At that time, and again, I think as a community, people were in shock. Everyone was. You did coordinate a community gathering in a local park to address the community, which I think is an action in and of itself in that type of a difficult time of how do you communicate with people, right? And we've been this mass media, we've got all the social media platforms and everything. Talk a little bit about what that process was for you of wanting to gather the community, and media was there also to cover that, to really address that, and how you framed that out of both the why and the what of that.
Right. That week was, again, I think I could sense our community was just lost. As you said, nothing like to that magnitude had ever happened in Urbandale before. And so I was lost, certainly, as a leader. I was trying to find my voice. I knew I had to do something. I knew I had to, that people were looking at me to provide a voice for our community. So how could we do that? And we had the idea that we would have a gathering in our park. It was a candlelight gathering on the couple of days after that. And it was really a healing time, I think. People could come together. We had several speakers. I was part of that, and honored to be part of that. And again, I came back to the message that we had to. Actually, you can visibly see the 6 pillars of character in Walker Johnston Park where we were, and I pointed to that and said, "This is how we need to move forward. We need to remember Justin and honor his life by all of us." Living a life of civility and character and moving forward. And that's the best way we could honor Justin's sacrifice to our community. And it was amazing, Scott. I think I finally found my voice after being so lost for a few days. I went to the grocery store a day later, and a woman I don't even know came up and gave me a hug and said, "Thank you." So it was one of those things where I knew I had resonated, I guess, in my own way to our communities as far as finding our voice, that we knew, again, as a collective community, this was a senseless act. It affected us deeply. But we needed to move forward and we needed to honor Justin.
Miranda, what lessons learned from that could you share with other municipal leaders? And again, we hope these things, whether it be natural disasters or a horrific, tragic incident like this, but they will continue in some places to happen. And there are lessons that can be learned and vetted. I think your example of being a little bit lost originally, but having to focus. And what would you advise to other municipal leaders, having lived through this, of things they should be paying attention to from that leadership role internally, council member communication, city managers, police chief, communications? What are some of those kind of internal trappings possibly that you would have, that you would encourage people, if this ever did come upon you, these are some things, take some notes on, that I would encourage you to think about doing?
Sure. I would highly encourage to have those lines of communication open. You're never going to be prepared for anything. I certainly was not prepared for this. We've had other natural disasters in Urbandale during my tenure that I was not prepared for, but that's what disaster preparedness is for. In some respects, you can at least work through the scenarios. Something happens, how you respond to that, and as key is having that communication. It's going back to communication and listening. We can certainly lead and talk, but you have to listen as well. So you need to have the right people in place and have the ability to listen and move forward and come up with, okay, what is the problem that we're dealing with, and how are we going to tackle it? And what's the best way to tackle it? And not one person has the right answer to that. It's a collective exercise to move forward. Everybody has their role, and you just need to be able to deal with the situation and move forward, and have the process in place that's going to hopefully see you through to the other side.
Well, again, having shared that experience as a resident, I do think it's a model for others across the country. And I know every state has their own model. So with natural disasters and these horrific type of incidents, but we really wanted to elevate that. I told you earlier when we prepared for this that I wouldn't go off script, and now I'm going to ask your grace to go off script, because there was a question posed, and we've got a minute to answer this. When Tiffany was talking about the major initiatives taking place within the region, somebody posed a question: how is this related to civility and local government? And so, like the Icon Water Trail she mentioned, which was, bringing 19 local municipalities together to try and find solutions of how they could work together so that they could qualify for these grants and the philanthropic needs and that. And how do you see civility playing a role at the municipal government level that helps advocate for these significant types of projects? How critical is that from your lens as a leadership, responding to this question that the person asked, which is a great question?
Sure. Again, it goes to communication and breaking down silos. And we can also all get in our own separate silos as far as communities and organizations. But I think what Tiffany's point was, and what I certainly took from that, and how I see our community in our metro area, is that we work together and we break down those silos to work together to do the greater good. Urbandale can't do everything on its own. The Des Moines can't do everything on its own. We all need to work together as a region, and we're better together as a region when we do that. So we have a number of organizations throughout the metro where we all get together and talk about the greater community and how we can do that, and what are the obstacles, and how can we come together to do that. So it all comes back to communication in my mind, is that we have that communication, we break down the barriers, and we figure out what the issue is and how to solve it and move forward. And I can point to the water trails is one you mentioned. There are a number of other regional organizations. DART is our regional transit organization that's been a great model of governance through our metro. We're working together right now on regional water, and that's going to come together here very soon. And that's one that was very difficult, and that I had a part of for 6 or 7 years. I've been talking about regional water, and we're finally getting to a point where we're going to have a regional water solution, and this region will be better for that, because we will have water is a scarce commodity, and we need to manage it as best we can. And so I think the regional water solution will do that the best way for our region moving forward for the next 50 years. We're really setting up a model that's going to be a success for the Greater Des Moines region for the next 50 to 100 years.
And those are two great examples, both Des Moines Area Regional Transit and what's emerging with water in this area. I know with Des Moines Area Regional Transit, there were many years that the governance structure was not being able to be addressed successfully, possibly due to not being able to come together and look at the big picture with some civility. And it was through that type of process that a governance structure was changed so that the hard issues of service delivery and cost and taxation could be addressed, which we're still in the process of in the metro area. So I do think that the civility element of that connection and working together. One last thing on that point that I'll just add is that I know the Greater Des Moines Metro and the affiliate chambers, municipal leaders with the partnership charter a plane every year and go to Washington, D.C. to advocate with the congressional delegation on these major projects to keep them informed of what's happening. But what I've sensed is most significant about those trips are the relationships that are built between municipal government officials and the partnership and affiliated chambers that are working together for the same issue. And I think that's something that we can all take a look at, as well as a connectivity between how does the community evolve with great governance. The last question I've got for you, Mayor Andeweg, is this. Just any closing thoughts that you have on leading with civility in the municipal arena, and specifically to what advice would you give to people who are just starting their service or thinking about getting started in their service at the municipal level?
Well, again, I keep saying this, but it really does come down to listening and being respectful of others. And not one person can do it alone. It takes a team to do it. I think of many great things that have happened in our area that have all come about as a team, and we all listen to each other, and everybody has some great ideas. You try to make the best ideas and move forward. But again, that comes down to listening and respect and being actively engaged in the community as far as what the issue is and how each person and every organization has a role in overcoming the obstacles so we can get to a good solution.
Well, I really think that that's great. What advice would you give or encouragement to somebody that's just starting out or even thinking about running for office right now?
Well, I think the best thing, or the one thing, is you're not going to solve everything on your own, and you're not going to solve it all in the first day. I've been mayor for 20 years, and my list of unfinished business is still large. So I try to check off some things on my boxes, but you do the best you can. I mean, that's what you have to remember too, is that not everything can be solved. Not everything, there's not a solution to everything. Certainly I found that from the soccer issue. There's not a neat box that you can tie up with a nice little bow for everything. But what you do is you do the best you can. And if you can't accomplish something, if there is a failure on a project, at least you make it a successful failure, I guess is what I would say, is that you've at least tried. And if you can't accomplish what the original mission is, at least you try to put it in the best place possible. So don't get discouraged by the fact that you might fail from time to time, but learn from those mistakes and you move on.
I think you're also a great example, Mayor Andeweg, that if the first time you run for office you don't succeed and you've got a passion for serving, don't give up, because it led to you becoming truly a national exemplar of what great municipal leadership rooted in civility looks like. That's why we wanted to have you share today this story on this summit. And I can't thank you enough for the person you are, the character you demonstrate, the leadership you give to the community you serve, but also for sharing your story with others that can impact across the country. So thank you for your time today. I wish you continued success in Urbandale, and continue to keep us posted on your efforts.